Two Clemson basketball starters just entered the transfer portal and they've already graduated. What's going on? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Clemson.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here, Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of this show, part-time host and producer over at 105.5 FM The Roar. Thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you're new to the show, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. You know how we do it here on Locked On, exclusive Clemson content Monday through Friday, every single week, right here for you. And don't forget to follow me in between episodes over on X at The Morgan T Show, where we can talk about all things Clemson whenever and however you want. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about two of Clemson's basketball starters entering the transfer portal and the shock that it brought to Clemson Nation. Also, I've got some discussion about the NCAA and their ruling that's coming up, and a future team of 2025. What if we bring back a legend from the past? I always like to do this in the offseason. I'll give you some thoughts as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's Gametime on the Gametime app. Clemson basketball had kind of a shock here. I know we've moved on to like off season for both football and basketball. We're getting towards the end of the season for softball and baseball, but basketball got back into the forefront of the headlines because two of Clemson's most important basketball players from last season, Etienne and Jaeden Zackery, have actually entered into the transfer portal. And when I saw that, I thought, this must be an April Fool's joke. This can't be April 21st. This doesn't make any sense. They've run out of eligibility. They've actually graduated. Now, I thought Jaeden Zackery was going to stick around and possibly they'd grant him one more year because of the JUCO ruling. I thought that he would come back to Clemson. I really still feel like that's a huge possibility for him. But it was under that transfer portal or that, JUCO scenario where Diego Pavia from football, if you remember, he was granted an extra year because they said, 2 years in JUCO is nothing that's the same as 2 years in Division I, and so it's not fair and blah, 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 right? So not fair. It's all about fairness nowadays. But, to me, they just keep changing the rules as we keep going. So we don't know what truly is fair or what truly is a rule anymore. But shocking to me was he going into the transfer portal because at first I thought, well, maybe he does have that extra year of eligibility. He just doesn't want to do it with Clemson. And I was kind of disappointed in that because we had heard that he does want to come back to Clemson. That's what we'd heard from him. So I didn't really know why he was going into the transfer portal. And then Etienne Schieffelin entered his name into the transfer portal. And that one really shocked me because if you're aware, Etienne Schieffelin did not have a redshirt season year. And so he's only played 4 years, but he's played every year of each year in those 4 years. So it specifically goes back to kind of, well, you've played your 4 years. That's what you should do. But now we're hearing that they're betting on the NCAA granting a 5th year of eligibility tied to, way back when COVID era was going around with some of these players that were kind of loosely tied with the COVID era. By entering in the transfer portal before today's deadline, it's like midnight tonight. They are actually protecting their ability to be able to transfer if they need to, but also be able to come back to Clemson if they need to as well. Now it'd be easier to come back to Clemson, but Brad Brownell needs to move on, right? And he basically has kind of moved on from these two players, especially Etienne Schieffelin. Brad Brownell needs to move on, and so it's kind of hard to say, should you stick around and hope to come back to Clemson? Should you put your name in the portal? I think the safe thing is you can always come back to Clemson. But the safe thing probably to do was to put your name into the transfer portal to see if that legislation will come through. Now, what we've seen in the past is that the legislation has come through and it's been heavily in favor of the player. not in favor of the university or the prior rules that we used to go by. So it seems as if we may be getting into more of a permanent 5-year situation as we continue down this path of chaos with the rules and legalities of college athletics. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think that the worst thing that we could do is allow judges from all over the country to decide, and lawyers to decide, how to run an athletic league or conference. Because athletics in themselves are not going to be inherently fair for absolutely everybody. There has to be a starter. There has to be a backup. There has to be contracts. There has to be, only a set amount of playing time. There has to be things that are penalties. And, you go down this rabbit hole of, I made a joke about they're going to take away the field goal being 3 points because it's unfair to kickers, and people who want to be a kicker, they should be allowed to have 6 points because, we can't discriminate against kickers. That's the way legalities do things. That's the way lawyers do things. That's the way judges see things. Trying to make everything fair across the board is not inherently the way sports are created. There are set rules, and sometimes the rules are just the rules. And it may be a disadvantage to a certain type of player, and maybe a disadvantage to a certain type of team. But I don't understand kind of how we're going to this, because the thing is, we're now giving them, you typically have 4 years in college. Now I know most people, some people take 3 years, some people take 5 years. I know friends took 8 years. I get it. For me, I think it was about 3.5. So I got a little bit early because honestly, I just went to school in the summer, and I kept knocking out my classes as much as I could. But it seems as if the rules are going to keep getting expanded and expanded. And I don't see how it's all going to work out. To me, it's just going to never look like anything that you've thought before. It's not even going to really resemble any necessary to, maybe it'd be barely even necessary to be enrolled in the university. But either way, I'm going to get off my soapbox here and go back to kind of the main point, which is that these two players are in the transfer portal now. And the idea being that whatever the ruling be on the 22nd, they don't want to kind of be out of luck or screw themselves from an opportunity if Clemson has already moved on. Now, if you look at Jaeden Zackery, I think he's in a great spot because really Clemson hasn't moved on from him. I think they would definitely like to have him back. Ian Schieffelin, you'd find a way to get him back. There's no way that you would let him walk away. I don't think that would be the case unless you just really didn't have any money left. But in fact, for me, I think Ian Schieffelin, you'd want him back as well, even though they kind of have replaced him because they got a couple of big guys coming in that are great rebounders themselves. So these guys, in the end of the day, these guys aren't bailing on the program. They're not trying to run away from Clemson or get out, but they are trying to put themselves in the best possible situation to benefit from the NCAA ruling that's possibly going to happen at the end of the week or maybe next week. It's a big deal for Clemson fans because, hey, possibly Schieffelin could come back. You got double-digit points, double-digit rebounds per game. Zackery, double-digit points, and a lot of assists coming back. So those two guys coming back would just enhance this team even further and really, solidify the roster from up to down. And I think this might be one of the better, this could make Clemson's basketball roster for 2025, 2026 even better. It'd be a massive win for Brad Brownell for sure. And at the end of the day, this is what the portal era looks like. This is what legality and getting judges and lawyers involved and the NCAA being handcuffed on every single ruling that they can ever do. And, it's going to benefit in some ways and it's going to be ridiculous in some ways. And sometimes I feel like, hey, we're making it worse so that we force the hand and we turn it into professional sports, and then at that point, I don't really even know how it's going to be tied to college at all, and maybe one day we'll get down to this road where you have a Clemson University basketball team that is a private entity funded privately, but basically associated with the university only from a branding standpoint. The players don't even have to play for the university. They don't have to be enrolled. I don't know. It'd be weird to me, but I could see it happening. I mean, I really do. Who knows? I mean, all options are out there now with the way that things are going. Technically, this is just a technicality, if you will. They're trying to put their name out there so that they don't get stuck in case Clemson cannot take them. And I think it's great for them personally. I think that's a great move for them. If I was in their shoes, I would do the same thing. If I'm sure Brad Brownell, I'm assuming he probably tells them to do the same thing as well. You want to protect yourself. The big hope is that they would end up coming back to Clemson if this all works out, which would be pretty crazy to see. All right, we're going to continue talking about some of the craziness with the NCAA and the rulings and the proposals that are coming up at the end of this spring and the summer, and how they're going to pay players going forward and what that means for Clemson. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge, and it's electric in the arena. With Gametime, you can be part of it without the stress of the last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices up on the app go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. I told you about my friend who recently went to a Braves game. He was scrounging around for tickets. Everything was just getting more and more expensive as he was looking at all these other competitor sites. And then he went over to Gametime and he found a ticket that was perfect for him. And also he had a huge discount because it was right before Gametime. So really, really big deal for him. And also all-in pricing. As you're going in there, as you're looking at what the cost is for you and your family, you won't have any surprise fees at checkout. You're going to see everything that you're going to have to pay for right when you get there. So there's no guesswork. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets on Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. We're continuing to talk about NIL chaos for Clemson fans. And, there's some rulings that are coming up this summer, really the end of the spring, where the proposal is that the NCAA is going to go into more of a structured system with revenue generation and revenue sharing, up to $20.5 million that will go directly to athletes in the form of direct payments from the universities. And these kind of revenue sharing, for me, is a huge shift. And Clemson must decide what they're going to do, because by June 15th, we'll all know for sure how it's all going to work out. And I think what we've heard from Graham Neff is that they're going to put a lot of money towards football. They're going to put a little bit of money towards men's basketball, and then a very small percentage for everyone else. That they're going to really go all in for football, which is the most revenue generating sport that they have by far. Anything after men's basketball really is not revenue generating. And so you know that football basically leads the way and carries all the other athletics. So I could see where you would want to do that. Now, this to me is going to be a trickle down effect, because universities are not going to want to lose money. They're not going to want to just take away a portion of their proceeds and give it to players without trying to recoup that in some other way. And the way they're going to do that is they're going to charge more for tickets. As we know that they're going to add a talent fee. They're going to add like 10% on for the players that are on the roster. So you're already going to see it in your ticket prices, and you're going to see it going forward. It's going to be ticket prices, revenue generating from TV licenses and commercials and advertisement sales across the university. And then I'm sure it would be food and beverage sales as well, with now Clemson being in the alcohol beverage sales game. That's going to go up as well. They're going to find ways to make more and more money and to be able to afford paying the players now directly. There are no more middlemen, which I love, and it's going to allow the university to actually pay the players properly, and they're going to have, some more checks and balances over it as well. But they're not really getting rid of NIL. You're going to have your NIL where it's like boosters are paying, but they are going to have some checks and balances there as well, where they're going to have to report to a specific website exactly what they're making from these outside boosters. Now, is that going to stop a lot of the shenanigans that are going on? Probably not. It's going to stop the tampering? Probably not. But it's going to stop it a little bit better, or make it a little bit better, in the sense that the baseline for all the players is going to be a little bit more even, and you're really fighting over bonuses. this player it's not going to be this player is going to make, 100,000 base here, but 600,000 base there. It's going to be more of like, okay, both players are making, 100,000 base. This player may get a little bit more NIL money than that player. And so they'll have to kind of weigh what their options are with those two scenarios. So you're still going to have an outlet to be paid through NIL, but you're also going to have an outlet to be paid through revenue generation. And I do like revenue rev sharing in this sense, because I do feel like it's fair. I think that, it will turn it into more professional. And I'm okay with that in this sense, because I do think the players need to be paid for their value and their worth. They are making more money for the university than the cost of tuition. We have to come to grips with that. And if you haven't already, I hope that, you kind of start to see that. But the players for years have been bringing more to the university than just the cost of tuition. Now, I know that they get more benefits than that. They get great facilities. They get great mentors. They get great tutors. They get great healthcare and, gym facilities and trainers and all that. And I think all that's encompassing as well. But there's still players. Now, maybe not the majority, maybe not everybody on the team, but there are still players that are producing the amount of revenue generation that is bringing to the team. Someone like, Travis Etienne is bringing millions to the university when he plays on the team. Someone like, someone like a Trevor Lawrence, those guys, those elite guys that are in front of, millions on the national media, those guys are bringing in a ton of money for your university. Now, I can understand the other side of it, because I'm a graduate. And so a lot of these players that are not the superstars, I can agree that they maybe not bringing as much value as they like to think that they're bringing to the table. I do feel like a lot of people are going to buy tickets and they're going to attend games and they're going to buy merchandise because it's Clemson and because they're a graduate of the university. I myself, I'm going to buy the orange stuff. I'm going to buy the stuff with the tiger paw. I'm going to go to the athletic events regardless of who the players are on the team, because I'm a graduate, and I'm loyal to the brand. I'm loyal to the university. It means something more to me than who's playing. But I think we all can admit I'm going to more games and you're going to more games, or you're maybe inviting more people, or you're maybe reselling your tickets for a higher value when they have better players on the roster. So there is an inflation in the price, and there is a value there for the players that are playing on the team. If you have a crappy team that sucks, then the ticket prices and things like that aren't as good. I think that instead of scholarship caps, they're going to move to, sports specific caps, as you mentioned as well. So not only are they going to get the revenue generating area of that, but they're also going to go to where, football gets 105 and the other teams get a set amount of roster spots. And all of those roster spots, they're not just like roster spots with no scholarships, which I do like that as well. I thought that over time, if you are valuable enough to play on the team and go to practice every single day, I think that you should be allowed to get a scholarship. Now, I walked on and played soccer, not at Clemson, but I was a walk-on and played soccer in college for 1 year. I didn't get a scholarship or anything like that. It was extremely difficult to keep it going. I ended up not continuing because my grades were slipping, and it was very difficult to practice every single day, to work out every single day, and really not get any playing time and, not get a scholarship or any kind of stipend at all. You're spending a ton of time away from studying to be able to be, for me, a practice dummy, a orange cone, if you will, for me. But for these guys that are on the football team and the scouting teams and the reserve teams and even the walk-ons, we're not going to have those anymore, really, because they're all going to be on scholarship. And I think that's okay too. I know that kind of goes away from what Dabo Swinney loves about, having walk-ons and being able to award players that, but you can still award players a scholarship, later on in the season. They can still fight for it, I think, but it won't necessarily be a walk-on who earns in that route, in that way. You really have to have scholarship to be able to play. So it'd be definitely very different. NIL oversight is going to be different as well. I don't really know how much I trust NIL oversight, to be honest with you, because you're looking at they claim that over $600 will have to be reported and reviewed. And there will be a third-party website or app that I think a website that'll be able to keep these, bad deals in check. I don't know. I mean, there's still going to be under the table stuff. So things like places like Clemson that don't really, get themselves involved in that kind of stuff, not a big problem, I think. But they're going to get some backup across the board, and it's going to put a little pressure on maybe some of those universities that are doing, maybe not the university, but they're boosters that are doing a little bit too much behind the scenes, if you will. I think $20.5 million is not that big of an ask for Clemson. Clemson is a national brand. They have TV money. They have the donor base to do it. I mean, look at, they're in little old Clemson in the middle of Pickens County, not much in that city, in that town. And they have an 81,000 person stadium. I mean, it's a giant stadium, huge facilities, great university. But the town itself is not amazing, but they travel well. We watch television. We have a lot of viewers with us, and we pack out the stadium, and a lot of times Clemson fans are packing out the stadium, whether it's, Furman or whether it's Georgia, it doesn't really matter. Clemson will follow their team. They will go watch their team, and they'll be loyal through and through. So to me, the $20.5 million is not a big ask, but it will be for other teams. And, a lot of people say, well, what's going to happen to these other smaller teams? And Clemson isn't a small market. But what's funny is like Clemson has such a big following compared to like SMU that is in a massive market for the country in Dallas, Texas. But, I think Clemson's always going to have an upper hand with viewership against SMU. It would take decades for SMU and success at SMU to rival Clemson, I think, when it comes to viewership and stadium numbers and attendance, things like that. I think that Clemson has almost like a unicorn in their sense. They're not in a big market. You're not going to get my joke is always, you're not going to get the Lamborghini of Oconee. You're not getting the Mercedes-Benz of Pickens, right? So they're not going to have these big time luxurious brands that are out of the town, and you're not going to get big sky-rise buildings, even though there's some controversy there. I know from downtown getting a lot of sky-rise apartments. They're not really sky rises, but they're much bigger than the little old Clemson that we remember. I get that. There's a lot of backlash there, but the town itself is not going to get massive, like a downtown Greenville or even a Charlotte. It's not going to get to that point, or Columbia. So the fact that Clemson is in a situation where they are a small market team that's able to survive and thrive, I think is really, really awesome. I think all of this kind of aligns with Dabo Swinney's mindset. A lot of people say, well, now they're going to get the revenue generating or revenue sharing method. Dabo Swinney's out. I don't think that's the case. I do wonder how long Dabo Swinney's going to stay around if they go to a full-on employee mindset, if they go full-on contracts and maybe even not, but barely loosely associated with the university. They're not even really students anymore. That's where I think Dabo Swinney might be able to, or might be on the verge of hanging it up. We've already seen a lot of legendary coaches do it. It wouldn't be shocking to me if Dabo Swinney does one day, when it gets to the point of, well, it's just another, professional league at that point. Right. So like it or hate it, this is the way college football is going, and players will get paid. And I think there's some good and some bad still going to be hanging around. I think you still have to walk through this tunnel of terrible until you see the light at the end of the tunnel, and maybe we'll get to a league that actually makes some sense, and to a governing body that's not a bunch of lawyers and judges that are really kind of have a lot of their own agendas out there as well. All right, we're going to finish up the show with kind of a fun segment. And the question is, what returning player would you like to have? What former Clemson legend would you like to have on the 2025 football team? Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better way to get on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you pick more or less on at least two players' projections, and then if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, PrizePicks keeps every game exciting. I love building your lineup, making sure that you have the best players on there. Get a guy that's a big home run guy like an Aaron Judge, or get a Shohei Ohtani who's going to be able to steal a base. Those are kind of easy ones for me. It's fast and simple. You can get your lineup ready in like 60 seconds or less. And when you win, the payout is quick, safe, and secure. I also love on Tuesdays like today, you get Taco Tuesday, where PrizePicks offers discounts on select player projections and even to give you even more value. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right. So, on the radio this morning, we were talking a little bit about, college football, and they were talking about Clemson and about how, there were some players that you really would want to have back. They kind of maybe weren't playing in the right era of college football. Ben Milstead from 105.5 The Roar, he mentioned that Woody Dantzler would be his guy that he would like to have back to just see what he could do in this era of college football. Now, even though, you really don't need Woody Dantzler because you have Cade Klubnik and you trust him and he's been able to kind of manage it. So now for me, when you look at the 2025 team, right, I know Woody Dantzler you don't really need him because Cade Klubnik. We'll go back to that. But for me, I've done this in the past on my shows where I've looked at what player would you like to have, past player, would you like to have to kind of fill out the roster for this season? Now, this is kind of a fantasy thing. It never really will happen, but what if? So I kind of wrote down what positions do I feel like the fans really want to see a need or a whole field, and what do I agree with and disagree with, and kind of what were some of those top players in those positions that Clemson's had. And I already know what you're going to tell me. I already know. So I'm going to go ahead and get it off my chest here. The punter position. All right. We all want a better punter, the best punter possible. That's the goal, is to bring in the best punter we can. And, finally not kind of play catch up when it comes to field position. So I definitely understand that. So I'm just going to get it off my chest and say, I agree with you. You heard it from me now, from my mouth. I agree with you. We definitely want to have the best punter. So let's just go ahead and bring back Bradley Pinion. Field position can win you games, close games. You know that. And you've told me that. And I agree with you. Bradley Pinion was an inside the 20 master. He had a powerful leg, and he was absolutely solid when he played for Clemson. And NFL, a long time NFL great for sure. He is a legit punter, and I believe he has a couple of Super Bowls under his belt as well. So I'm not disagreeing with you here. Let's put Bradley Pinion up there. I wish I had a graphic. Bradley Pinion, let's put him up there. All right, so we got that off of our chest. So I honestly, it's kind of fun to even say the punter because you have a pretty decent team, 1-2 deep, if you're kind of going to the punter at this point, right? So that's why I feel like, we got to be pretty excited about this 2025 football team to be picking on the punter first, right? For me, though, I don't think a lot of people would go this route. So, when I was on the radio and I listened to it and I looked at the text line, nobody really went this route. And I know that Clemson did just go and get in the portal for Will Helt. So I get it. And I think Will Helt's going to be a monster. But kind of going back to you wish you had a player who played in this era, played in a successful team and wasn't like a good player on kind of an average team. That guy for me is like Gaines Adams, rest in peace, Gaines Adams. I think he played when I was a kid, kind of growing up, and Woody Dantzler was around then too. And CJ Spiller was around those times. And he was a defensive player of the year. And, he was a dominant defensive end. And he could be one of those guys that could really pair with Peter Woods and TJ Parker. I've never picked Gaines Adams. In the years that I've done this, I don't think I've ever picked Gaines Adams as one of those guys that I would pick. But, it kind of is an emotional pick for me because I miss him. I wish he was still around. I wish he was still, associated with Clemson. I wish he, all those things. But Gaines Adams for sure would be number one for me for this team because they definitely needed a defensive end. Now, I know that they went in the transfer portal and got it, but let's say they didn't go in the transfer portal. And maybe even if they still did, I would still think, you probably need some depth over there. At that point, if you had Gaines Adams, you probably wouldn't even need to go into the transfer portal, really. So that was my first thought. And, then my second thought was cornerback. I know there's been a lot of talk about the secondary. Maybe you would go safety, cornerback. So safety would be like a Jaron Curse, big, physical, versatile, can cover anybody, can play the run, was a general when he was out there, NFL guy. To me, as RJ Mickens moves on, I could easily replace him with Jaron Curse. I mean, that's what I would do. And then the other guy would be Nate Wiggins, I think. Cornerback, you could probably say AJ Terrell, maybe somebody like that, Mackenzie Alexander. I think a cornerback would be a good spot to replace somebody with, or not to replace somebody. Let me say, add somebody in. We don't want to replace anybody, but add somebody in that was a legend or a former star. So to me, I would go heavy defense, which is kind of crazy to think. If you were going on offense, the only players that I could really think of would be Travis Etienne, with the running back room still being kind of like, you don't know. We assume it's going to be good, but we don't fully know. And really, you don't need a quarterback, I don't think. But if you did, I mean, if you had a quarterback, I mean, probably go with Trevor Lawrence. But Travis Etienne definitely would be a guy who could just light you up. All-time leader in rushing touchdowns and for Clemson, and an every down back, elite receiving skills, perfect fit for Garrett Riley's system. There would be absolutely no question marks at that point. I mean, if you had any one of these guys that I mentioned, I think 5 guys that I mentioned, maybe more. If you had any one of these guys, I think it's almost like national championship or bust, really. And that's what's funny about it is Clemson just needs one guy to step up and to have like a massive year, an all-American type year. And they would be at that point where it's like, okay, national championship or bust now. They've got it. So running back, defensive end, cornerback, safety, punter. If any of those positions, somebody steps up and just absolutely dominates their position or more than one person, Clemson is really, really to the point where you got to be excited about what you're looking for in 2025. All right. I appreciate everyone being a part of the show today. Thank you again. It's Tuesday, so I appreciate it. Go get in on a PrizePicks and Gametime as well. And thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft with Damon Parson and Keith Sanchez as your favorite college players get ready for the next level. Get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, I think we got baseball tonight. We got softball tonight at 6 o'clock. So we got a ton of stuff over on ESPNU for those of you Clemson softball playing Tennessee. So big ranked matchup there. See how well they're 0-2 against the Volunteers. So we'll see how well they can do maybe tonight. I appreciate everyone's love and support for the channel. And as always, Tiger fans, we'll see you tomorrow, and we'll see you at the top of the hill.